The mainstream medical establishment has spent the last decade telling you that gender-affirming care is safe, reversible, and absolutely necessary for minors. They built an entire industry on that narrative, but the cracks in their foundation are getting too big to ignore. All across Europe, countries like the UK, Finland, and Sweden are slamming the brakes on these procedures for minors, citing a massive lack of long-term, high-quality evidence. Yet here in the United States, the federal government is apparently trying to hide the ball. A DC watchdog group, mine, has just filed a massive lawsuit demanding the release of hidden federal documents regarding puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones given to youth. Now, we're basically saying that, along with our allies at the 1792 exchange, these untested, irreversible protocols to, quote, transgender children are equivalent to, even things tried in the Tuskegee experiments. The data, though, is finally starting to catch up to the dogma. And our next guest has spent his career on the front lines of this exact fight. Doug Napier is the executive chairman of the 1792 exchange. He has spent years advocating for corporate accountability and protecting children from what he calls the gender industrial complex. And here he is today to give us an exclusive preview of what's going on behind the scenes and what 1792 is doing about it. Doug, welcome on.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be with you again.
So 1792 Exchange, an indispensable organization, really, along with us at the Oversight Project, have been fighting for a long time on a certain study called the Olson-Kennedy study. We may be on the cusp of it being released to the public. Can you tell the viewers why this is such an important study?
Well, first of all, we start with the premise that corporations and the general public, governments should not be subjecting our children to these mass medicine experiments with unproven results. We should be caring for our children, not cutting them up. So we know there have been a number of studies out there that have looked at the issue of puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapies, as well as the surgeries themselves. And we've been told all along, well, you got to do it for these kids because it's a mental health issue. But the reality is that these studies are showing that it's not helping their mental health. The mental health issue needs to be dealt with differently, not by mutilating their bodies. So there's been a study that was commissioned through NIH at the taxpayer expense. I believe the price tag was around $10 million. It was launched in 2015. It's been referred to as the Olson-Kennedy study, as the authors and researchers. And it was supposed to be a 10-year study. They're going to track this over time. Apparently, they got about 9 years in and they stopped the study, and the study's been buried. We haven't been able to get it. We've been pushing for it with Oversight, Project Oversight, and others to try to get them to release the study. We have a strong suspicion as to why they haven't released it. And I believe one of the researchers even made the comment she didn't want it to be weaponized. Well, truth is not a weapon. Truth is a shield, and it's a cure to the problems that we're dealing with, especially when it comes to our children and protecting them. So we just want to get that study out, and whatever it says, we're going to deal with it. And if there's errors in it, we'll address the errors. But we think that study is going to just underscore the same thing we've seen in the CAS study and the Finland study, and things we know through common sense medicine.
Even if it didn't end up where the advocates wanted it to, it doesn't matter. It's a taxpayer-funded study. The people deserve to see it. So we're excited to hopefully, get it out to them so they can. Now, you mentioned two other studies there, because this isn't just unique to the Olson-Kennedy study, but I think you mentioned UK and Finland. Can you talk a little bit about what those said?
Yeah, and they came to basically the same conclusion, that there is not any solid evidence, empirical, through these studies, through the case studies, that the puberty blockers and the hormone treatments for our kids are helping the situation that they're trying to supposedly address. So, gender dysphoria has always been cataloged as a mental health disorder. And, they've softened it over the years to try to take away some of the stigma, but they've swung to the other direction. Now, basically, they're saying we need to embrace it, and we need to give them puberty blockers, fill their bodies with these drugs that cause irreversible, permanent harm, without even knowing if this is good. If you remember back in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, they were doing lobotomies on people for psychiatric reasons. And this was just the rage. That the doctor invented it, actually got a Nobel Prize for medicine. And now we look back and think, what were we thinking? to do this, and it wasn't just adults, it was children back then too. 40 to 50,000 patients were subjected to this experimental process. Now we just look at that like it was the dark ages, like it was bloodletting or using leeches on people's wounds. And I think that the puberty blockers, the hormone replacement for children is going to fall in that same trash bin of history that lobotomies and other things have happened. So these studies, the CAST study out of England, the study out of Finland, came to the same conclusion. Don't do this on minors. It's too early. The evidence isn't conclusive. Avoid it. And then now we've had the American Academy of Plastic Surgeons come out and say same thing. There's not enough evidence here to justify it. Put it off till they're 19, because we know most kids work through this by the time they reach adulthood. It's a phase. It's a real issue. It needs to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed the right way and not causing permanent harm to our kids.
It's crazy we even got to this point. And I think the lack of critical thinking amongst adults is a huge reason. But, during the Biden years, it was absolutely out of control. You've used the term the transgender industrial complex, but they had the government during those 4 years. And I remember seeing documents about every agency and department doing everything they could to, deal with this in the workforce and encourage it, but then also externally. But, that's largely gone now. But the huge other player in this is corporate America is one of them, obviously the medical industry and the nonprofit. What are you seeing in corporate America right now during the Trump years? Because this is what your group does such great work on.
Yeah, one of the things that 1792 Exchange routinely does is we gather data. We just gather facts on what's going on out in the corporate world. We try to shine a light on corporate behavior and get them to move back to neutral, get back to business, stop getting involved in some of these controversial social issues, especially ones like this one that are harming kids, harming their customers, harming the kids of their workers. So a few years ago, the Human Rights Campaign's been probably the number one advocacy organization. They're a highly financed LGBTQ organization. And they were telling companies that if they wanted to score a perfect score on their corporate equality index, that they had to provide these quote unquote gender affirming care to minors in their health insurance plans. So a lot of companies adopted that. They were also getting pressure from the Biden administration too. And now that pressure's gone. The Trump administration has issued their executive orders. They are doing everything they can to protect minors from these procedures. But we got to get the companies to follow suit because these are embedded in a lot of health insurance plans. We've identified over 560 companies that we know are transing our kids through their health insurance plans. And we've offered to help them work out of that and get out of it. Two companies that I want to mention specifically have taken the right moves. Walmart has a carve out that won't provide these benefits to minors, and Schwab. They both made steps to say we're not going to do that in our insurance plans, and we commend them for that. Now we got to get the other 500 plus companies, and actually there's a lot more than those. Are just the ones we've identified. So it's not just a moral issue. It's also a financial risk to these companies. It's a liability because they're complicit in these harms. And there are over 24 lawsuits now by detransitioners. One just got a verdict in New York for $2 million. So these companies are going to be in the crosshairs because they're facilitating this. They're funding it, and they know better now. There's no excuse not to stop it. So they need to stop it today, and they need to protect our children. You use the word adult. We need adults in the room making adult decisions to protect our children.
Rolling it back, as they say, because obviously health insurance should be for healthcare, and this is not healthcare. And good on Schwab, too. I'm going to give you a magic wand for a second. You got the magic wand. The Trump administration has already done so much in this space. What else do you think that can be done out of the federal government?
Well, I think there's a number of things. First of all, they've done an awful lot. The executive orders, have been put out there. They've at least set the policy. They need to make sure there are no federal funds being used to cover these procedures. Not Medicare, not Medicaid. And I say Medicare because disabled minors get their benefits paid through Medicare. And we've seen evidence of this. They need to make sure that none of the federal insurance plans include this. And they need to also put pressure on the private sector to stop doing this, whether they incentivize them, or they just say, look, we're going to hold you accountable because we got minors that are going to end up having issues for the rest of their life. Many of those are going to go on Medicaid, and then the federal government gets stuck with the bill. So my magic wand is do everything possible, get the message out there. Also get the Olson-Kennedy report released to us through NIH and DHS or HHS so that we can see what that says. Make sure that some of these academies, the WPATH files, which is the organization that set supposedly the medical protocols on this, have been so severely debunked, and yet you still have doctors and hospitals referring to those standards. So the Trump administration needs to issue some more statements on that. Now, last December, HHS and Secretary Kennedy issued a fantastic report, had a bunch of detransitioners at a press conference to address this issue. I think they're doing a really good job. They just have to keep leaning in and leave nothing left to chance, and use the bully pulpit that the White House has to talk about this issue.
All gas, no brakes, just like the 1792 exchange. Doug, thanks for coming on.
Hey, my privilege. Good to see you again, Mike.